Good evening and a very warm welcome. He dreamt of this moment for years. Prime Minister Modi's tryst with destiny finally arrived, and what a stirring speech it was, leading many to wonder aloud whether this was the best speech delivered from the ramparts of the Red Fort in recent Indian history. And that's what we'll talk about with a crack panel that we've put together to dissect Prime Minister Modi's first speech. Rarely has there been so much anticipation around any one speech. Let me get you to meet our guests for our program tonight, starting with my immediate right from the Congress Party, Senior Leader Mani Shankar Iyer. Welcome, sir. Senior Fellow at CPR, we've got Rajiv Kumar, General G.D. Bakshi, leading military analyst, social anthropologist Shiv Vishwanathan. With us also, former Chief Economic Advisor Dr. Ashok Lahiri, Sanjay Kaul representing the BJP, and Rakesh Sinha, ideologue with the RSS. I'm sure you've heard it, because if you've been in India, there's no way that you could have missed Prime Minister Modi's speech through the day. Slightly generic so that each one can come in on what they think might have been a better speech than the one that we heard today. Let me start with Rakesh Sinha from the RSS. Do you think, sir, that this is the best speech in contemporary Indian history?
There is no doubt this is one of the best speeches. It is not the best speech because it was delivered by Narendra Modi, a RSS person or a BJP man. I find three reasons for that. First, Nehru started with a tryst with destiny. And within 24 hours, millions of freedom fighters who fought for the country became jobless. Only dozens of people ruled the country with the bureaucracy. For the first time, this Prime Minister has appealed to the people, and this is the tryst with the willpower of the country, number one. Number two, the speech is from the decolonized mind. So it is completely decolonized mind. Third, for the first time, in the past tradition we find, every Prime Minister is challenging Pakistan or warning Pakistan, number one. Number two, warning the terrorists in the northeast. And number three, crocodile tears for the minorities or categories of India, Dalits, minorities. For the first time, this is a positive and symbolically.
Where he's reaching out to all Indians.
All 125 crore people.
And not people classified.
Not the categories.
As per certain category. Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer, now we remember Pandit Nehru's tryst with destiny being one of the great Independence Day speeches.
But it wasn't
delivered at the Red Fort, but it's one of the great Independence Day speeches. Do you think this ranks in the same category, or can you recall somebody who made a better speech than this, more stirring in its invocations?
I think Atal Bihari Vajpayee's speeches combined both fluency with substance and an appeal to people that lay in his capacity to sound as if he was a human being. And all his speeches were always laced with good humor. His Hindi was simply outstanding.
Modi didn't sound human to you?
Pardon?
Modi didn't sound very human to you in the manner that he spoke?
He's not at all a human. I mean, he's a human being, I'm told, medically speaking. But because he's such an authoritarian character, and because he is always hectoring, he doesn't come out...
He sounded inclusive today. He reached out to everyone.
He reached out to everyone by refusing to acknowledge that everyone is not at the same plane. I mean, we were just told that one of the great things about him is that he wasn't appeasing the minority. Now, this is to deny the existence of the minority character and the problems that people face because
you don't think it's one of the great speeches of contemporary India?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
It was an empty drum sounding a lot of noise.
Empty drum making a lot of noise. Shiv Vishwanathan, have we heard one of the best speeches of contemporary Indian political history?
See, it depends on your standards. The tryst with destiny speech is a part of myth. There's an iconography to it. This speech is good, but at the bottom I'd give it a belated bronze medal. Nehru, Vajpayee, and then the rest. Within that, it has a certain power, it has a certain enthusiasm. But if you look at the content, I think one has to look at the fact that to a certain extent, it eliminates noise from the speech. The frontier, the minority, Pakistan all get eliminated. So in that sense, if unity moves towards uniformity, it is inclusive.
Interesting. A gold from the RSS, disqualification from the Congress, of bronze from Shiv Vishwanathan. Ashok Lahiri, what do you give?
Your question has to be framed carefully. You said in recent times,
That's
and
right.
you said ever. Let's focus on recent times, and Mr. Iyer has mentioned Atal Bihari Vajpayee. That was a good speech. But this was the first time we heard a post-independence product of India delivering a speech. And this was a 63-year-old. Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was older when he became Prime Minister. And Mr. Modi, of course, is known as a fiery orator and a mass leader. So we saw a mass leader communicating to the people, and I found a lot of enthusiasm and energy in his speech. In terms of substance, I saw some echo of Kennedy-like behavior where it's a very controversial thing to ask people, don't ask what the country can do for you. We tell you what you can do for the country, but the country exists for me, some people will argue. But this was an exhortation to the people about cleanliness.
So you'd say he's better than Vajpayee, as good as Vajpayee, or not as good as Vajpayee? We're looking for specific answers from our
think
panelists.
in terms of sort of propagating or transmitting energy and enthusiasm, I would say he was a notch better than Mr. Vajpayee.
Slightly better than Atal Bihari Vajpayee, says Dr. Lahiri. General Bakshi.
I tend to go along with Shiv that in
Bronze medal for you as well?
in iconic stature, because of the very value of that event, seminal, one of a kind of a speech that was given on an occasion that will never be repeated. So quite obviously, the tryst with destiny, is in a class apart, because you can't repeat those circumstances. What is significant about this speech is that it comes at a paradigm shift in Indian politics and Indian polity. There is a distinct paradigm shift from a coalition culture. Once again, you have a non-Congress government in majority, on a majority on
Would you
its
think
own.
it's better than Vajpayee ji's?
Vajpayee had great flourish as an orator, great felicity with language, but unfortunately, health was failing him.
So since this is not being...
And towards the end, you found that, unfortunately, it was, there were longer pauses in the speeches, etc., which is because of health reasons, which of course, the health here is vibrant.
There's far more vitality in these speeches. For people who don't remember, what we'll do now is just play out a quick comparison between Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee speaking from the ramparts of the Red Fort and comparing that with what we heard today, to refresh your memory and give you a sense of the comparison at hand.
अपने स्वतंत्रता की 51वीं वर्षगांठ पर मेरी ओर से आप सबको बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं। हम सब जानते हैं कि आज़ादी हमें सस्ते में नहीं मिली है। एक तरफ महात्मा गांधी जी के नेतृत्व में आज़ादी के अहिंसात्मक आंदोलन में लाखों नर नारियों ने या कारावास में यातनाएं सहन की, तो दूसरी ओर हजारों क्रांतिकारियों ने हंसते हंसते फांसी का तख्ता चूमकर अपने प्राणों का बलिदान दिया।
मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, आज देश और दुनिया में फैले हुए सभी हिंदुस्तानी आजादी का पर्व मना रहे हैं। इस आजादी के पावन पर्व पर प्यारे देशवासियों को भारत के प्रधान सेवक की अनेक अनेक शुभकामनाएं।
Interesting to see two master orators. Rajiv Kumar, the same question to you. Do you think, given that he's younger, more forceful, still on top of his game, this speech ranks as the best speech in contemporary Indian history?
Well, I have no doubt about it, actually. I mean, I think this is a speech which connected with the people. I mean, he's a master orator in any case. And then to come, because he spoke with the people. He wasn't reading out from the script. He seemed spontaneous. He seemed to be speaking with the heart. Whether he practiced it so well or he was doing it genuinely doesn't matter, but he did connect. And then in terms of the substance of the speech, I mean, I think what I saw there was the confidence of a post-independent Indian to lay out the Indian weaknesses out in the public for its, for world to look at, but yet doing so with the confidence that we'll be able to tackle it. So and to then not be overawed by the occasion and talk about things like the toilets and the rapes and the and the sex ratios and all of that. I think this was one where I think for the first time he was connecting and focusing on the domestic audience and not trying to score brownie points from an audience in the West.
Sanjay, is there a fear that we could possibly be getting carried away? This speech comes on the back of 10 years of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh speaking from the Red Fort, which really lowers people's expectations, and therefore people get more enthusiastic than they should and say things which 20 years later, when you look at this program, might not seem that correct.
Look, I'm not sure that, a speech on the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August is about testing a Prime Minister's oratorial skills. I think it's about a test of ideas, and I think it's about the potency of intent. These are indicators. You're laying down, particularly if it's your first speech, so to say, to the nation, address to the nation, you're laying down what you intend to do, how you intend to get there, and some broad guidelines. But there's a lot of micro stuff, there's a lot of macro ideas there. But I think also, the thing that you really have to see is, I remember Osho Rajneesh used to say that Buddha was the greatest communicator, because in the manner that he communicated, he did not allow you to disagree with anything he said. And I think that's what Narendra Modi was able to achieve today. Find me a man who disagrees with what he said. You could talk about what he omitted, and like Mani said, or you could talk about what a personal dislike aside, but you could not find anything wrong with what he said, and it resonated with a lot of people on factors.
So I think, are you prepared to comment on whether you think this speech is better than Vajpayeeji's speech? That's a googling for you.
No, I think I made it clear. The point is, you're tested against how you deliver, not about how you basically are able to speak. So I think Mr. Modi, his style of functioning, his intent is pretty clear. Look at the breadth of audience he addressed today. Naxals, to netizens, to farmers, to bureaucrats, parents, soldiers, women, families. He stoked social issues. He talked about...
While touching on all of these, he still did not make it into a Dhobi list. Which is what some of the speeches have been in the past, that we have done all of this, and then you sort of, in a very, wooden manner, sort of account all that you've done, and then, equally wooden manner, you reel out the, schemes and the things that you would do in the future. None of that. There's a flourish to it, and yet there is an ability to connect with all the different constituencies and different concerns of the people. I think that's
there is a very interesting aspect to it. If you try and put it in typology of speeches, it's not Obama-esque, but
Why
it
not?
is Lee Kuan Yew. It is Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. He's talking of a national character. Then he speaks of cleanliness, discipline, the harmony and the synchronization between diverse ministries, coordination of activities, and then the deliverables are very high. He's not talking in terms of grandiose schemes. He's spoken of, the banking outreach, bank account for every Indian, a lakh of rupees as a bima for every, as an insurance for every Indian. Then he is talking of a toilet in every school for every girl child. And he's incorporating in terms of corporate social responsibility.
Mr. Iyer, would you agree with what Sanjay Kaul says, that he's pressed the right button so much so that a Congress guest who came said, I'd give it a 6 or a 7 because the Congress also can't seem to find much wrong with the speech?
I would like to give 10 on 10 to General Bakshi for having discovered the right person to compare him with, which is Lee Kuan Yew, an authoritarian man who treats his people as if they were school children who need to be reprimanded by the principal. I think that was absolutely appropriate. The fact is that if you compare one Prime Minister whose first speech has not been referred to so far, Rajiv Gandhi, coming there and informing them that the Assam Peace Accord has been signed last night, informing them that the Punjab Accord is on its way, informing them that there's going to be elections in Assam followed by a peace accord with Mizoram. When you see the list of achievements there, Rajiv may think it's a laundry list, but that was a speech which addressed what were contemporary concerns of a very, very high order.
There was also a speech where Rajiv got confused between Swatantrata Divas and Gantantrata Divas, and it became quite the laughing stock.
I don't think that was his first speech. I think it was a much later one. But that's a small thing compared to the substance of what was being achieved. Then he says that there's something dramatic about his talking about toilets. Well, the Bharat Nirmal Abhiyan, the Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan, was announced by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh last year. He talked about toilets. I don't know of a speech in recent times that hasn't talked about toilets. And he may talk at at a high rhetoric about honoring women. But what is Meghwal doing in his cabinet, in his council of ministers? Is that Meghwal, if he'd announced that he was sacking Meghwal for not respecting women, then one might have said that there's some substance to what he's saying. And then he talks about, he doesn't even mention Panchayat Raj. I mean, anybody who thinks he can run this country without empowering the people at the grassroots talks of a Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana, when it should be a Panchayat Adarsh Gram Yojana. And the Sansads are a total of 800 if you include the Rajya Sabha, and only about 300 if you include only the BJP and its allies. Now, are they each going to do 5 villages? How many does that account for in 7 lakh villages?
Okay.
These are all things.
These are important points.
That are much more to do with the governance of the country than simply trying to capture some media attention.
That's an important point. There is stirring rhetoric, but can Modi translate that rhetoric into tangible change? Will we see the government meet the deadlines the Prime Minister laid about having a toilet in every home, about using the MP lad scheme better, about having toilets in schools? Will this remain about rhetoric, grandstanding and a show of pomp, or will we actually see change?